Euromaxx highlights. Coming up on the show. Man of Music. Jan Vogler is the new artistic director of Dresden's music festival. In the spotlight, Vienna's Spanish writing school comes to Germany. Tales of Weimar, a newly published book about a German city and its famous sons. Euromaxx highlights. And here's your host, Robin Merrill.
And a very warm welcome from Berlin. We begin with Belgium's most famous 20th century artist, and you'll know who I mean when I show you this. But there is a lot more to René Magritte than bowler hats and apples, as you'll find out in a new museum dedicated to him in Brussels. The museum is in a magnificent old palace where Magritte himself had an apartment for over 2 decades. We had an exclusive sneak preview.
Apples, pipes, umbrellas, and bowler hats in wild disarray. René Magritte would have liked that. He hated things to be orderly. 40 years after the artist's death, the new Magritte Museum in Brussels is using these images to publicize its unique exhibition covering 2,500 square meters of floor space. There's a lot to see. But what exactly?
We have the largest and most important Magritte collection in the world. It spans more than 50 years, and it's special because it covers all the creative periods of René Magritte's life.
A side of Magritte that has been totally unknown until now. In the early 1920s, he started out as a graphic designer. This work inspired the style that made him Belgium's best-known painter. Brussels' Royal Museum of Fine Arts contains more than 200 works by Magritte, among them some of his most famous masterpieces. Piecing together the collection took over a decade and would not have been possible without donations from private collectors.
Je suis un homme heureux.
I'm a happy man because I think we've realized a project that until recently seemed impossible. Finally, thanks to some chance encounters and strokes of fate, this museum has come into being.
The museum also gives visitors an insight into the artist's personality.
Magritte appeared to be very middle class. He always wore a dark suit and a white shirt. But that was just for appearances, because actually he was a revolutionary, an anarchist, a creator, a great artist. That was simmering inside him. He was like this museum. Outside it has a classical facade, but its interior resembles what Magritte was like inside.
Magritte placed his favorite objects everywhere, even on the shoulders of his wife, Georgette. She was the love of his life. He used to show her the beautiful and the grotesque, like these pieces from his Epoque Vache. Magritte created these works in the late 1940s for his first solo exhibition in Paris.
In this phase, he stressed Belgium's provincialism. For instance, here you see lots of checked patterns, which we recognize from napkins and from clothing. This is very reminiscent of provincial Belgian countryside, where people have checked tablecloths and checked slippers. Here in the long nose, there's something grotesque. It's a bit of anarchy, scrawling and a little dirty. The Epoque Vache caused a huge scandal in Paris.
Still, Magritte remained in demand as an artist. And today he's more popular than ever.
Magritte's strength is he's an artist who pleases everyone, intellectuals and ordinary people. He had an enormous influence on his era and remains contemporary even today. At exhibitions by young artists today, the references to Magritte are often quite obvious.
Magritte has become a model for other artists, and thanks to the new Magritte Museum in Brussels, his true face will finally be revealed starting June 2nd.
To the German city of Dresden now for the classical music festival there. The renowned cellist Jan Vogler is the new artistic director, and he's brought lots of new ideas to the event this year. And they seem to be going down well with the public and critics alike.
The German city of Dresden has a long musical tradition, with an annual music festival dating back 32 years. The festival's slogan this year is New World, representing a musical bridge to America. The Knights, a chamber orchestra from New York, is opening the festival in Dresden's famous Church of Our Lady. The music world knows Jan Vogler primarily as a cello soloist. Now he's also the new artistic director of the Dresden Music Festival.
We're pretty relaxed, actually, as a result of the last few days' intensive final preparations. Yesterday at the rehearsal with the Knights in the church, the atmosphere was so good, I could picture the concert in my head.
Jan Vogler invited the Knights to the festival. He previously worked closely with them in New York. The musicians, led by the conductor Eric Jacobson, regard themselves as friends who play music together. Jan Vogler bridges the old and new worlds in his private as well as his professional life. He lives in New York and Dresden. Vogler developed a new concept for the music festival.
The beginning and the end of the festival belong to the young musicians. We have the Vienna Philharmonic and the Concertgebouw Orchestra too, but the stars will play in the middle of the festival. The opening is dedicated to the Knights. The Knights is an orchestra that stands for new values. That's what I want to show at the music festival, that we have to put faith in young musicians.
Young musicians and unusual programs. The new artistic director wants to establish the Dresden Festival internationally. And the huge wave of interest, despite the financial crisis, is a promising sign.
Our advanced ticket sales 4 weeks before the start of the festival were greater than any previous sales figures ever. That doesn't mean the crisis can't affect us, but at the moment I'm just glad we can unleash energies that counteract the crisis.
Energien entwickeln können, die so ein bisschen dagegen laufen, also in die andere Richtung laufen.
During the festival, Jan Vogler is staying away from the limelight as a musician. He'll give 2 concerts, but his main role is as artistic director.
The concerts are the main thing. I'm attending every concert, especially in my first year. I want to see the faces of the audience, to see how much of my message is reaching them.
The festival opening got a warm reception. Dresden gave the New World a rousing ovation.
And staying in eastern Germany, the city of Weimar has been home to more than its fair share of cultural icons. Goethe and Schiller, Bach and Liszt, to name but a few. This year is the 250th anniversary of Schiller's birth. He and Goethe wrote some of their most famous works there. But their private lives were full of drama, as journalist Peter Braun tells us in a new book on famous lives in Weimar.
The Goethe Museum in Weimar. In 1794, Germany's most famous man of letters was visited by Friedrich Schiller. It proved difficult for the host.
The thing was that Goethe hid his lover Christiana Vulpius from Schiller, because Weimar society didn't approve, and Schiller's wife Charlotte didn't care for Christiana at all.
Schiller stayed for 2 weeks, and Goethe was faced with the arduous task of keeping his scandalous relationship under wraps. But 6 years after their first meeting, he and Schiller eventually became friends.
When they met the first time, Schiller accused Goethe of being an appalling egoist. In return, Goethe apparently said that he loathed Schiller.
Goethe and Schiller are inextricably linked to Weimar, and their legacy is to be found throughout the city. Journalist and writer Peter Braun set out to follow in their footsteps, as well as those of more modern sons of the city. It was a journey that took him to the Anna Amalia Library, as well as the original home of the Bauhaus movement. And from the Grand Duke of Saxe-Weimar-Eisenach, a gift to Goethe, a country retreat.
Karl August invited him to Weimar. The visit was supposed to last just a few weeks, but he ended up staying the rest of his life. To begin with, they had a very close friendship. They were both young. They had a wild time. They spent a lot of time together, bathing naked in the river Ilm, even in winter. It was a very wild and tempestuous time.
This was where Goethe spent his first 6 years in Weimar. It would remain a favorite retreat until his death. This is where he wrote many of his best-known works, and it was here that he met up with many of his lovers. And indeed, the woman of his life, Charlotte von Stein.
He found her a house here on the edge of the field. She moved in because he needed to know she was close by, and she also needed to be near him. He grew asparagus and vegetables in his garden and had it sent over to her. If he was hungry in the evening, he sent a messenger to see if she had any dinner left over.
But tragically, their love was never consummated. Charlotte von Stein was a wife and mother, and despite Goethe's many letters, gifts and declarations of undying love, she never gave in to him, even though the love was mutual. In 1786, after more than 10 frustrating years, the deep friendship between Charlotte and Goethe ended with his sudden departure to Italy. He never said goodbye, and her heart was broken.
This is where Goethe and Charlotte von Stein met alone for the first time. The date, the 6th of December, 1775, is engraved on the corner of her desk. You can still make it out.
Although they got off to a bad start, Goethe and Schiller would go on to exchange over 1,000 letters. In 1799, Schiller was moved to Weimar and became Goethe's neighbor. But Schiller was in poor health and died 6 years later.
According to one story, the wallpaper in Schiller's office might have been a factor in his death. It was painted a shade of green that at the time was made with arsenic. The walls would have been damp, and this released the arsenic, which probably contributed to his death.
Schiller and Goethe are buried side by side in Weimar, but the spirit of their era still prevails more than 200 years later.
The Spanish riding school in Vienna is one of the most famous in the world. It is here where the magnificent Lipizan stallions perform classical dressage in its purest form. It is an extraordinary thing to see, but the Lipizans are an endangered species. There are only 3,000 to 4,000 left in the entire world. That's why, when they go on tour, they are pampered like Hollywood movie stars.
Berlin enjoyed a special treat last Saturday. Vienna's Spanish riding school introduced the high art of classical horsemanship to a packed arena. "1,000 equestrian fans in Berlin's O2 World were delighted by the show. But what they didn't see was all the hard work involved behind the scenes. This is the man who makes sure everything goes smoothly. Stable master Johannes Hamminger joined the school over 20 years ago. Especially while on tour, the sensitive stallions need to feel at ease if they are to perform to the best of their abilities.
Diese Ruhe, was Sie jetzt sehen,
This calm is a crucial issue with stallions.
muss man sich große Gedanken machen bei Hengsten, weil es
There can sometimes be problems to do with the pecking order,
Rangordnungsprobleme,
something you want to avoid, of course.
aus dem Weg gehen. Da gibt's dann
We have a special
Transportplan,
transportation plan
gibt's einen genauen Stallplan,
and an exact stable plan where each horse is given straw or sawdust.
eingestreut, versorgt wird.
The show is now over, and it's time to pack up and prepare to leave for the next destination, the German town of Osnabrück. The group will be taking 6 tons of supplies with them, from special food to needles for saddle repairs. In addition, 150 tons of quartz sand and 50 cubic meters of wood chips have to be scattered on the ground of each venue, and then cleaned away again. The luxury deerskin saddles have been taken off, and the horses are being readied for the next stage of the journey. Their legs have to be wrapped in bandages to prevent the animals harming themselves while on the road.
Too tight and it hurts the circulation. But if it's too loose, it'll just fall off.
It's a short trot to the horses' new mobile homes. Each trailer accommodates 6 horses. Because they are such a luxury commodity, the animals enjoy the best possible conditions. Each horse gets his own pen so as to minimize tension. And CCTV cameras enable the driver to keep an eye on them. The carers' berths are right next to where the horses sleep, so they are always on hand. A good night's rest is unlikely.
We won't get any sleep tonight. The chains are always rattling.
The trucks take 7 hours to cover the 420-kilometer journey. Air cushioning reduces the strain on the animals' limbs. It's 4 in the morning, and the convoy reaches its destination. The exhausted horses are gently guided into their new temporary quarters. Stablemaster Johannes Hamminger conducts a careful examination of every single horse.
Frisst schon Heu und ist nicht nervös.
He's eating. He's not nervous.
Dann würde ein Kreis laufen und
When the horses don't feel comfortable, they show it by going around in circles and whinnying loudly.
Sie wissen wieder, die ganze Gruppe
But they're
ist da.
relaxed. They know the group is back together and they'll be taken care of.
Wenn man das spürt, dass den Pferden hier
It's nice when you notice that the horses feel good and are happy to be on solid ground again.
einen festen Boden haben.
The horses and their riders now have 3 days to rest up. They need to be in top form for the thousands of other equestrian fans flocking to see them, both on tour and in Vienna.
Turning to men's fashion now and the made-to-measure suit. And there's a problem, because a lot of suits that are allegedly handmade, indeed after a fitting by your tailor, are then often made by machines. A tailor in Vienna is trying to defend her noble trade in a book that shows how you can tell a real bespoke bit of tailoring from something off the peg.
A real gentleman knows that tailor-made clothes will stand the test of time. Each piece a one-off, bespoke suits that fit the body like a second skin. These days, there are only some 800 old-school tailors left in Europe. Ruth Sprenger is one of them. Based in Vienna, it never fails to annoy her when people fail to appreciate the skill that goes into high-quality clothing.
Some
customers seem to think that if they're measured for clothing, then they're getting a tailored garment. That's completely wrong, because with made-to-measure clothing, the customer won't actually see it until it's finished. There won't be any fittings, only rarely anyway, and the customer doesn't get to decide on any details, such as fit, shoulder width and shape.
Suits off the peg come in all shapes and sizes, and theoretically it shouldn't be too hard finding one that fits. But in fact, it's almost impossible. So what exactly is the problem? The experts say that the trouble is, many of them just aren't well made.
Take a look at this bump, and this one here too. To the trained eye, it's very jarring. The shape isn't right. And this crease here, which could actually be worse, it means the fabric drifts towards the neck. It's a very common problem.
Rutschbringer caters to individual wishes. An original design can be altered to suit tastes, and customers can choose their own fabrics, colors, and styles. She schedules 3 fittings per suit. Rutschbringer is determined to preserve the dying art of bespoke men's clothing. She's even published a book charting its evolution. Take, for example, the classic double-breasted suit, a favorite in the 1920s that was usurped in the 1950s by the single-breasted blazer. To many, suits represent the last word in gentlemanly elegance.
Men wanted to look like Cary Grant or Gary Cooper, Hollywood icons who were quintessentially elegant, in a way that's long since disappeared.
Rutschbringer spends roughly 90 hours on a single suit that comes with a price tag of 3,000 euros or more. It seems like a lot, but they know it will last a lifetime. Each section is sewed together by hand rather than glued. Rutschbringer is only happy when she knows that every detail is perfect.
There's actually no such thing as the perfect suit, but there's the almost perfect suit. For a tailor, getting as close as possible to this ideal is the biggest challenge.
Rutschbringer is keeping a dying art alive, one stitch at a time.
And if you want to see some of those reports again, go to YouTube and type in Deutsche Welle English and look for Euromaxx. That's all for now, though. Until next time, bye-bye.